Welcome back to the Appalachian Outfeed. So we are about a week and a half post Hurricane Helene up here in the Appalachian Mountains. And by this time you will have heard that North Carolina absolutely got pounded, and they did. We took our own pounding, but I would not trade places for what went on down there. For our part, we were out of power for right at a week, 6.5 days. And we are, let's see, 3 days on the backside of getting power now. I'm up on the road that runs up from my house, from the creek down there, on up to the neighbor's place. We spent better part of a day clearing this little road so that they could get up there. It's 3/4 of a mile, and it's a fair bit of cutting, pretty big stuff down. And we're gonna kind of work on this tree real quick, kind of doing all the kind of fine-tuning cleanup now, more or less. And I want to show you guys a couple things. I'm not a pro by any stretch, but I have done a fair amount of storm cleanup. Some of the stuff I think I'm going to say may actually be pretty obvious to you, but maybe it'll help somebody out there. As I speak, this is Monday, before a Wednesday landfall for Hurricane Milton. Right now it's at I think Cat 5, about 175 mile-an-hour winds. They're forecasting that to drop to maybe a Cat 3 or Cat 2 by the time it makes landfall, probably around Tampa. That's where it sits right now. So there's going to be some cleanup down there. Good gracious. So maybe something I'm going to say will help some folks out. So let's look at what we're working with here. One of the ironies about this storm, and really any storm, is you would think that standing dead trees like this one here, look at this thing. This is an old pine tree. See that stinking thing? You would think that that might fall down. Well, you might be right, but you might be wrong, and in this case you'd be wrong. And there are numerous examples of that very thing around here, whereas you walk over here and you look at this perfectly healthy big old oak tree, large oak tree. You look up in there, that thing's going to be close to 2 feet, maybe 30 inches at the base across. It's a big tree, nice healthy thing, and here it comes down, right? And I spent my morning working on a locust tree that was dead, but right next to it was a big pine tree that the top blew out of. So what's happening is the foliage in these good trees catch the wind and they come down the ground. It rained for 3.5 days, so the ground's all nice and saturated, and the wind catches these good trees, where on those kind of trees there's really nothing to catch the wind, right? So that's what's going on. There's another one right there. You look up in that thing. I need to take these things down, but frankly they're so dead they scare me. So I'm hoping they'll come down in a storm when nobody's on this road. This is not a heavily traveled road, but yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about what I hear other people talk about in terms of dealing with these kind of storm damaged trees. And the first thing is this: a lot of people will talk about going in and cutting the tree at the base right out of the gate. I strongly disagree with that, and here's why. When you got that root ball anchored down in the ground the way this one is, and it's that big, this tree is not going to roll, it's not going to slide, it's anchored to the ground. And so that's a big deal, having the tree anchored where it's not going to roll on you as you're cutting the top of the thing, and there's all kind of weird tension on here. That'll get you messed up if a tree rolls on you when you're all up in there cutting limbs. So my opinion is leave the base anchored if it's anchored, and make that your last cut or close to it. The other thing is I always start at the tip end of the things, the skinny end, and work up to the big stuff. Again, I've seen people talking about limbing the whole thing and then come back and cutting it, but man, start at the tips of the branches with the small stuff and kind of work your way back to the big stuff. For one thing, it kind of clears up. You can see what you're doing, see what you're working on, and you're less likely to get pinched, and it just makes life better when you work from the skinny end to the fat end. Of course, every cut you make, you got to be ready for something to spring at you, and here again, the saw can hurt you, but what you're cutting can hurt you as well. Last thing is, and this is my little trick, and I haven't seen anybody talk about this before. On its face, when you see it, it's almost self-evident, but I don't know, I was cutting the other day and thought about this. I'm watching this truck turning around. Thought about this, and I thought it was a good little trick. It just kind of occurred to me. I've never seen it, never heard anybody talk about it. And again, it's very obvious that it's a good thing to do when you see it done. But I've never heard anybody talk about it, so maybe it's not something somebody would necessarily think about. And that is, when you've got a branch like this that's kind of high off the ground, this one here, and I'll walk over there in a second and give you a reference. The temptation might be to take your saw and just lop it off, you know, as it sits up there, and just, you know, work your way back. That's not a bad strategy, but the higher the branch is off the ground relative to where you're standing, the more dangerous it is. Overhead cutting is dangerous. The saw can do some weird stuff, and it's not ideal to be cutting over your head. So what I'm going to suggest is that you go to the base of this long limb, cut it, but leave it attached, again, kind of anchored to the tree, and then come back and buck it to length. You can see here we're doing firewood length stuff. This is about to go in the truck here in a little bit. So let me demo this thing. Again, this is a really good, clean example. And I've got another big cherry tree in the yard, unfortunately, that I'm going to show you on a very big limb. You couldn't cut overhead if you wanted to, unless you wanted to walk out on the trunk. But this one makes just a nice, clean example. So let me get geared up and get the saw going, and we'll get this limb taken care of. Okay, we're back. So what I've got is my little MS-170 here. Chain's kind of loose. That's my other rule, is to use the smallest saw you can on this kind of stuff. So you can see this thing is not that far above my head. So this isn't the worst case scenario, but when you find yourself reaching up like that, for sure you're going to want to do what we're about to do here. So instead of coming along here and bucking this thing down with the bar and chain right in my face, we're going to walk up to the base of this limb. It's a pretty long one, and we're going to cut it up close. Okay, so what I just said was, rather than trying to buck up high like that where the chain is literally in my face, we're going to go up here and cut it with no hinge, but leave it attached, and drop this limb down to where we can work on it more safely down about waist level or whatever it is. So stand by for that. Let's see if we can get you in here. I think this is going to be the best we can do. in for a close-up. It went pretty good. So you'll notice now that limb is literally on the ground, and we can work on it where it's pretty safe and nothing's gonna fall on us. And if the saw does do something janky, we should be in pretty good control of the saw. And so that's what we want. Now this limb was busted up already a little bit. You can see that split there, and of course when I made that cut it opened up some, but that's what you're going for. We still got some good attachment, but now this limb is down to where we can work on it, and we'll go ahead and get this dude bucked up. Now what we're going to do once we get this one done is come back and get on this big chunky boy right there, and you can see relative to the saw that thing's going to be about a foot across or so, and we'll get I think we'll be able to set up and get a better look at that. While we're on the topic, you always got to watch out for overhead dangers. You see that locust tree right there leaning? Now that thing's been leaning for probably at least 5 years. I need to get in here and get it, and I will shortly. It's just barely hung up there. That's gonna make some good firewood, but that is an overhead hazard, hence the metal helmet. All right, let me get my trusty MS-170 and we'll get this thing cut up. Boy, this 170 has been doing some great work this whole storm. I've been alternating between it and the MS-500i. It's been really great too. Cut up a decent sized locust this morning with it that had blown over on my neighbor's driveway, maybe even post storm, not sure when that thing came loose, but we got that thing taken care of. So tell you what, I'll park you guys right here. Ooh. If I don't make you seasick. And yep, get my ears put in. Hope that chain doesn't sling off because it's probably too loose, but we're gonna do it live, baby, and see how she goes. This won't take but just a second, and then we'll get on that big one and do it again. call suboptimal. Try that again. Guys, up a little bit closer to the action. So I will say I made one to make one better fine-tuned adjustment on this thing, and that is I cut a little bit too much wood up there, so it's not getting a lot of support up there on that hinge, and had I left a little bit more wood, it wouldn't be binding the saw as much. It would be more floating off the ground. So yeah, note to self, no two trees are the same. Okay, so we're set up on this big old honky chunky log here. The camera setup is somewhat suboptimal because you guys are on a side hill, as am I, so everything's wanting to run off the hill, but this I think was the best I can do. So I'm going to try to do the same thing, which is make a no hinge cut, no face cut, and let this thing drop down so I can get the far end down there, down to where I can cut it, and then we'll start on that far end and work back. Because this thing's so big, I really don't know how this cut's going to go. I could end up getting pinched. I don't think it's going to roll, and I've got a little stile here underneath me on my side that should keep it from just dropping off. But we'll see how it goes. So let me get my ears in, because Lord knows this 500 is loud. Get my gloves on. The saw is slightly warmed up. So here we go. Do this without crashing anything. All right, that was fairly uneventful. So we'll get down there at the bottom. I mean, this thing's pretty solid. I don't think it's gonna fall on me, which is good, because we're gonna be running the 500 kind of head high, chest high kind of thing, trying to get this thing bucked to length. That gets us to another little discussion about stuff, which is the best way to go about this. If you're cutting for firewood, do you cut it pole length and haul it back to your house and then buck it up there, or do you buck it in the woods and then have to load 5 million stinking pieces? Well, for me, the answer depends on where I'm at and what equipment I have available to me. My partner up the road's got a very large tractor with a grapple, and there is a case to be made for cutting this thing into pole length chunks and letting him come down here with a grapple and just haul it up to the house and let me cut it up there. However, that's about a week off before he can get here, or a few days anyway. And I've got the truck here, I've got the space, and I've got the time, and I can literally back the truck right up to the rounds and chunk them in there. So we're gonna go ahead and buck this bad boy down to length and see how that works out. So let's get repositioned and get on that. I just want to make sure we capture this. I can't see exactly what went on with that last cut, but this is kind of what we're looking for. See up in there? Definitely still connected to the tree. Now, could that thing break and pop off? Absolutely. And in fact, off camera when I was repositioning saw, and we'll get down here and I'll show you this, the big log that I cut. Landed or came to rest on another log, so that was taking some of the weight, and I wanted to see really what was going to go on with this thing. You can see right there by the saw where that big limb I cut is resting on this other limb. Well, I didn't want that. I want this thing floating, hanging in the air if I can get it that way, take the pressure off of it, take it out of a bind, and also to let me know that this thing ain't going to let go while I'm cutting on it and hurt me, which is the whole point of this to start with. So yeah, when I was kind of shaking on that log a little bit and trying to pull it that way off that log, we had a little snap, crackle, pop up there by the cut, so that was a little bit concerning. So I'm going to cut this thing on the kind of the hard side to cut from, because the footing's going to be kind of bad in there. But I'm doing that because if this thing does let go, it should go in that direction, not this direction. So I'm going to stand over here on this side, if that makes any sense. And if it doesn't, well, sorry. All right, throw my earplugs in and get in there on the saw. I'm going to shove on this log. You might hear it pop again from the correct side of this thing. Let's see how it goes. Man, this is some treacherous stuff to try to walk on. especially when you're old and decrepit. All right, so maybe that's got a little bit of pressure off of it. Whew, I'm gonna try to clean this thing off. My theory is this gets safer the further up we go when we start taking weight off this thing. That's my theory. And the only reason I'm comfortable getting all up in here like this, because I got a pole behind me and a pole in front of me and a pole underneath me, is because, again, we're anchored up there. I don't see this thing rolling. Now, I could cut something and it could let go on me. But I'm pretty confident about the work piece that I'm cutting. I'm not going to do that. We're about to find out. All right. I'm mainly coming back to make sure y'all can still see. But that was about as good as that could have gone. I almost got pinched on that first cut, but backed out of it, took care of it, so no blood, no foul on that, literally. And So again, those last couple rounds we cut off there, you see how that thing was floating, actually lifting up as we went. And that is precisely what we're going for. All right, I'm gonna move you guys around for these last couple of cuts. I'm actually gonna have to get up, I don't have to, I'm going to get up on the log and stand on the trunk when I'm making these last couple of cuts. That chain on the saw has been working a little bit, so it's not as sharp as it could be, but it's doing a pretty good job. I'm still pretty happy with it, so we're going to roll with it the way it goes, the way it is. Man, these heels ain't no joke. I laughed a little bit. I had a lineman from Kentucky that came in and was working on the power lines, a young, wiry little dude. First thing out of his mouth before he said a word to me, this was last week during the Helene cleanup. First thing out of his mouth was, "Man, y'all sure do have some rough country around here." Man, this guy's from Kentucky. I would have thought their country was at least as rough as ours. Let me point out one more thing here. So, yep. So this little stop down here at the bottom where I'm pointing, that was my little safety factor earlier when I was making the first cut up over here. So if something would have happened and it tried to roll toward me, if you remember, it was I was on this side of the tree. That little stub might have caught this big old log if it came at me for whatever reason. So it might hit me, but at least it wouldn't be pinned. But now, since I'm cutting from the other side of the log, I want that stub to go away, because that's going to preclude this big trunk that I'm cutting on from dropping down potentially in this great big old deep hole in this other root ball right here. So I'm going to go grab the saw, come around here and make that little cut on that stub poking out, and then I'm going to get repositioned on the trunk and cut the rest of this thing up. Oh, there went a tree. Oh, dang. Did y'all hear that? That whack, that metallic whack. Trying to make my way down the hill and I grabbed onto what ended up being a dead tree. It's only about that big around, but it hit me right square in the helmet. So, yay for metal helmets. Still don't really know how to do the fucking Billy Ray cool guy thing where you rev the saw and run it and stick it in the wood. We'll have to learn that little trick. All right, so now we're gonna cut this little stub off, and then we're gonna get back to that main trunk. Here we go. I think that's about as good as we're going to get right there. Seemed like a good idea at the time. All right, so here again, just gonna readjust the camera, make sure we're in frame over here for this last couple of cuts. I did think about going ahead and separating this thing, finishing up my original cut right there. Well, what that's going to do is lay it down, and it'll be buckable from there, but it wouldn't be floating anymore and more likely to get pinched and get dirt on the bar, chain, and all that kind of stuff. So I just went with it with a little acrobatic trick there. Oh, going back to leaving the root ball thing, there is one potential concern, not a potential concern, a concern that you need to be aware of if you're going to work on a tree with the root ball still connected to the ground and the tree. And that is, depending on how things shake out, the root ball can actually stand the tree back up as you take weight off the top of it. So be aware of that. It is impossible to know what kind of crazy stuff's gonna happen when you start cutting. So again, man, wear protection and keep your head on a swivel. You might ding me in the comments for not wearing chaps, but doing all this climbing around and everything, I'm afraid stuff would just get hung up on the chaps and flip me upside down and leave me hanging there, and then y'all could laugh at me, but that would be very uncomfortable. All right, so 2 more cuts on this main trunk, and we'll be done. Going back to the thing about the overhead dangers, let me just show you. So I'm sitting the camera up. I'm obviously behind you setting the camera up, and I just looked up. And so here again is that leaning locust tree almost directly overhead. See what I'm saying? So stuff can kind of sneak up on you like that. Again, man, oh, this stuff can get dangerous. If you're paying attention and you know some things, you'll see that right square up here on the front of my helmet is that sticker that came about after Jed Walters, I think, got killed by a branch falling out of a tree on some storm damage work. I say a branch, it was more like a tree trunk, and it killed him. Really good cutter, and boy, I tell you what, it backs me up, because I think about if Jed can take one like that, anybody can. He's known more about cutting than he's forgot more about cutting than I'll ever know, and he still got taken out. Now granted, he was doing dangerous stuff, but man, I'm telling you, this storm cleanup with all the forces at work and this tangled mess that you end up working in sometimes, it's exceedingly dangerous. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to take a break. Go sit down, look at things and ponder, and look, man, you might need to walk away from some stuff. I've done that before until I could get some better equipment, or another set of eyes, another brain on the problem. This is not any place for ego. Ego gets you killed out here. That's not what got Jed. It was oversight on his part and the whole crew. Nobody saw this snag that was up in this tangled nest of limbs up there, but it got him. Okay, enough about that. Let's see if we can get through this thing. In a hole. All right, here we go. All right, I think that's gonna wrap up the festivities on this one. Fun part's over. Now I gotta load all this mess in the truck. Oh Lord. Oh, one last little safety note. You might have noticed when I was walking around, this radio I've got hooked to me. So my wife is just over the hill there working in the kitchen. I guess she's working in the kitchen. She's got a radio over there, and so if I did something unforeseen and got messed up or whatever, at least I can key her up and say, hey, come bring me some help or something, and vice versa. She can call me as long as the saw's not running. Last thing, so with the radio, I'm trying to find a setup where I can hook the radio to some earmuffs and be able to pipe the radio in under the earmuffs. Now I could just take a set of standard earmuffs and run me a little dongle up in my ear and put the muffs on over that, and I could do that, and I probably will end up doing that. But they do make muffs with a 3.5mm jack that'll plug directly into the radio, and that should give a little bit more clarity and be a little less fiddle factor there. But what I'm having trouble is sourcing anything that'll work with one of these helmets, which I like, the metal ones. This one's kind of old school. I mean, and I'm looking at maybe getting a more modern metal helmet, and maybe even one of those hard hat, maybe even one of the helmets that's got the Ear Pro. I've seen the Sena, S-E-N-A rigs that Jacob Rogers used. That's a little bit overkill for me. Jacob Rogers is guilty of treason. That's a little bit overkill. It's got a boom mic and all this kind of stuff, and it works off of Bluetooth, so you can talk to people. I need something that's going to hook into my radio and give me some Ear Pro and comms at the same time. If I got to stop and key up a lapel mic, that's fine too. There's about, I don't know, a dozen ways to skin that particular cat. I just haven't found the cost-effective way that I'm happy with yet. So if you got any sources on Ear Pro like that, post them in a comment below. I'd appreciate it. Ideally, I'd like some Bluetooth so I can have my phone on listening through Bluetooth, and then have the radio plugged into the jack so it will override the Bluetooth. That would be ideal, but I have a feeling that's going to be expensive, and again, trying to incorporate it with a helmet would be best. All right, enough yapping. We'll let you go. We'll see you next time.